From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast. This is episode 502. I am Andrew in our forum, Andrew NLSC on X. With me, my co-host Derek, DP3 in our forum, and DP3G and DP384 on X. Derek, good to be talking to you as always. What's new this week?
Step backs, crossovers, alley-oops, tip dunks in a Super NES style graphics. What's on my mind is Hoopland from Koality Games, and we both got our hands on this. It's a new mobile game that doesn't really have a full release yet. They're still, it would be considered probably by the developer as early access at this point. But man, this game is actually a lot of fun, and it has a ton of depth, Andrew.
We've been talking about bemoaning the lack of basketball games in recent episodes and talking about how even a game like Basketball Classics by Nemo Gamer, which we love, would be fantastic to see. And Hoopland is absolutely along those lines. As you say, it's more early access at this point, updated from the beta, a very significant update from the beta recently. And yeah, we both got our hands on it, been meaning to for a while, and Koality Games is in our forum, obviously, shout out to him. And yeah, a really, really impressive mobile game. And I'm not usually big on mobile gaming, basketball or otherwise, Derek, but this is pretty cool.
Yeah, and not only is the gameplay itself deep, but it's deep in modes. It has a season mode where it's 29 games unless you pay for the premium version, and the premium version is only $5, and it gives you access to the full game. So all the customization features, everything else. But once you pay that $5, you can, do a season if you want. You can set it for like 82 games in length. It has stat tracking. It has league leaders. You can do trades. All of this in, like I said, like a Super NES style game graphically. And you have the ability to create a team. You have the ability to create a league. It's super impressive. From my understanding, it's also going to be incredibly moddable. And I really hope, Andrew, that this game comes to Steam. And, the developer who I've spoken with quite a few times on X, he didn't ask us to say nice things about this game. He didn't ask us to promote this game.
This is not an ad.
This is not an ad. We're not getting paid to say this stuff. That Andrew and I always are honest on the NLSC podcast. We are thoroughly impressed with this game. And the way that I played it on my Samsung is I did the on-screen buttons. So pass, shoot, etc. Those buttons were on the right, and my player movement was like a virtual stick on the left. And it was actually incredibly functional. So, I played a game against the computer. I'm working on getting my screen recorder set up on my phone so I can record some highlights and share them with the community. But yeah, I have my fingers crossed that this game comes to Steam, because I think you and I would jump on Parsec and have a blast on this.
Absolutely. I use the on-screen buttons as well. Reminded me a lot of the Android mobile version, I believe it was the same on iOS as well, of NBA Jam that EA released around about the same time they did the NBA Jam 2010 for consoles. They also released the mobile version with the on-screen controls. And you can go back and read my old review on the NLSC. And as I say, I'm not a big mobile gamer. I'm not the biggest fan of touchscreen controls and being hunched over a phone or tablet or whatever, but it is a lot of fun. It is definitely a game I would recommend to people who are more into mobile gaming than I am, and even I am willing to give it more of a shot because I did really enjoy my time with it, and the mechanics are great. It does work really well, even with those touchscreen controls that I am a bit iffy on, being the dinosaur that I am. But I would absolutely love this to come to Steam so that we can have those modding possibilities, obviously, but also to play it with a controller in my hands.
I think what I'm impressed with is thinking outside of the box, where, the developer decided, sure, the game is going to look primitive in comparison to today's graphics, right? Like, this isn't PS5 graphics. This isn't PS4 graphics, not even PS3 graphics. He is taking a very deep gameplay and mode approach in a Super NES style, like a 16-bit graphic direction.
But that's kind of
and
in
how
right now.
cool would it?
That's kind of in right
Yeah,
now.
I mean, how cool would it have been, Andrew, growing up?
Exactly.
To have Hoopland, let's say, on one of those 16-bit consoles, being able to execute, like I said, a double tap of the shoot button to execute a step back, to be able to do a step back, then go into like a crossover, to be able to do tip dunks and throw alley-oops so seamlessly. That's the stuff that makes this game so special. It's saying, you know what? I could probably scrape by and people would still buy this game if I gave it primitive controls like the old Super NES titles had. But he didn't go that direction. He wanted to make the game deep. So big shout out to the developer there.
And also it's worth mentioning that the premium version, as you say, $5 US, I think as of the latest conversion, about $8.49 or so, $8.50 Australian, still very reasonable for a game. Again, reminds me a lot of basketball classics that even in early access, it is so impressive, so solid, so well made. So again, I do hope that it comes to Steam as well, that you are getting pretty good value for the free-to-play version, if you will. The premium version adds all of those extra features, and there is a promise in the release notes that there's no microtransactions. That is not the kind of mobile game this is going to be. And in this day and age, I really admire that, Derek.
Yeah, that's what we need more of, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even basketball manager games right now on the various platforms are just
we talked
loaded.
About one. Yeah, we talked about
that exactly. One. I'm not going to name the name, but it didn't do well. Apparently it's been, poorly reviewed, and not a lot of people are buying it. So
what a shame. Yeah.
I know. What a shame. But yeah, what I find impressive is that it's a developer that cares about the consumer, right? That isn't greedy and whatnot, and that's what we love to see on the NLSC. So I would like to have the developer on the show at some point too. It would be great to interview him and get his thought process out there so people can see what he was thinking when he was putting together this game, why he made it as deep as he did, his thoughts on microtransactions, etc. So maybe we can have him on the show as well.
We'll definitely have to see what we can do about teeing that up, because getting those insights into development. I mean, we always critique basketball games, obviously, and we like to think we know a thing or two about video game development, but to actually talk to somebody who has been in the trenches, been coding, and really knows the ins and outs of developing a game and releasing it, it's always great insight to have. And yeah, I am very impressed with the mechanics. Adding those modern mechanics like shot timing to, it sounds like such a simple thing, but it's something that we didn't have in most games back in the day. So it is combining that classic art style with some modern sensibilities. Again, very similar to basketball classics. So yeah, I really hope this game succeeds. And if there is a push to get it on Steam, if we need to help anything out with early access or promotion, we'll certainly be quite happy to do that, because yeah, I want this to come to PC.
Absolutely. I think we need more basketball games on Steam. Period.
Yeah.
And like you stated, the modding community will hit the ground running with this, kind of like what they did with basketball classics. And, they'll get the real names in there. They'll get they'll get some cyber faces in there if possible. They'll create the courts. They'll create the atmosphere, all of that stuff. So yeah, that would be great. I messed around a little bit in season mode on that game. I think it's called Franchise. And there's a way for you to make it play an 82 game season. You can configure it that way. So you could make an NBA mod for this game, right? The bones are there.
Like a sandbox.
So I think
sandbox, really, yeah.
Right, exactly. I think somebody would jump on that. So Hoopland, I definitely recommend it. Look for it on your Play Store or your Apple Store, depending on what phone you have. And yeah, definitely worth a look. But Andrew, you've been playing a lot of NBA 2K14. And you're playing your My Career, but at the same time, you're also doing a retro series, and this is on the PS4 version of the game. You just can't get enough of this.
I really can't. Yeah, all these years later. The fact that I'm more than half a decade into My Career, I did put that aside for a while because I was messing around with the rosters in 2K14 PS4 to create some alternate retro teams. I've got some great footage coming out. I put out the 95 showdown between the Bulls and Magic is up now. I'm bringing back the retro series. I've got some alternate retro teams, customized retro teams for different years that I'm going to put out there, including a matchup that I know you'll like, Derek, the 2008 Nuggets versus the 2008 Magic.
You know how much I love that Nuggets team.
Yeah.
You know how much I love that Iverson, Melo, Kenyon Martin, Marcus Camby, J.R. Smith, Nene, that Nuggets team is so fun in video games. And even though they didn't do anything, they got bounced in the first round of the playoffs by the Kobe Bryant-led Lakers in 2008. They were still fun to watch, in real time.
And play with in games.
You know my love for Allen Iverson. He was one of my first favorite players. I used to have his shoes, all of that stuff. I'm a big Iverson guy.
That's definitely going to be a game to look out for. The ending. I thought the ending of my 95 showdown between the Bulls and Magic was pretty good, but that's a pretty good ending as well. That won't spoil anything there, obviously. Also a couple of others. A recreation of the 2008 finals between the Celtics and Lakers. Also a lot of fun there. 2003 Wizards versus Jazz, MJ Wizards. I've also got a 2K6 video. There's just been a lot of recording lately, Derek, that I need to sit down and cut it up and make into the highlight reels, but that's a lot of fun. But I had put my career on the back burner because I'd changed the rosters, and to get back the custom roster that I had, which was an unofficial roster update, because that official roster update is long gone, so I had unofficially updated my custom roster, the single custom roster slot for NBA 2K14 PS4 X1, as people may remember, had customized that with final 2014 season rosters. So to keep that, you have to back up the file and then restore that user data file after you've finished messing around with it. So I hadn't been playing my career so that I could know, okay, that's the user data file that I need to restore. This date lines it up, and it's kind of inelegant, but it's also a way of essentially managing custom roster files, more than one custom roster file for 2K14 PS4. But yeah, as much as I love that game, obviously, and lots of great videos to come from that, man, was that disappointing what they did with the rosters that year.
Very poor depth. That game, you can't create players. You can only have one custom roster. It was, you couldn't use multiple teams in a season mode, all of that stuff. So there was a severe lack of depth in NBA 2K14 for the PS4 and Xbox One, which is the main reason why my brothers and I, for years, stuck with the PC version.
Absolutely.
Of NBA 2K14. Not only because of all the great mods, but it's the fact that you could create players in that game. You could use multiple teams in a season and whatnot. So there was way more depth to the PC version, and the gameplay is still so similar. We've talked about it on prior episodes. The gameplay still has a lot of the same bones in the PC version as it does on the PS4 version. So I will say this. I was proud of the comeback that WizCard Rush and I had on NBA Live 10 using the East versus West, and that video is also up on YouTube. How good does that action look when the game is being played the right way? You got LeBron going in, cocking back his one-handed hammer dunk and whatnot. We have, Kobe Bryant getting on the fast break, the CPU, doing a windmill. We have, I felt like it was very authentic. Obviously more effort in the video game All-Star Game than what we get in real life, even back then. But just that game can look so good when it's in the right hands. And I thought WizCard Rush played very well in that game.
I agree. I commented on the video that you could pretty much get a top 10, I thought, of the plays from that game alone. I was very glad to see the Ray Allen spin, that very slick spin on the baseline drive under the hoop for the reverse layup. Just so great. Live 10, there's a reason it's still in our rotation, right?
Yeah, you and I have been having that, as a go-to for a couple years now.
Parsec, yeah.
And I don't think we've had one bad session on it, whether it was against each other or co-op. We always come out of the session saying positive things about the game, which, like we've said on many past episodes, it's why we look back, on it sometimes with sad eyes, right? Because what would the game look like if they had continued to build off that? NBA Live 14 would never have been as rough. It wouldn't have been received so poorly. The direction of EA Sports NBA Live, the series, would be looked at as, not only good, but also competition worthy. It would be, something where you could feasibly say year in and year out that NBA Live is competing with NBA 2K, and people do have a second viable option. So it is sad sometimes when you look back and think that they tried to start over after NBA Live 10 for who knows what reason, but it wasn't the right decision. So.
And that's the thing that we've learned in years since, or it may have even been a few years after the whole Elite 11 debacle, that it was in the works for a couple of years. They had this idea. So why they were going to hand it over to a hockey guy and try to get hockey game controls from the NHL series into an NBA Live game, into a basketball game, is just absurd. But can you imagine if they had actually got classic teams in Live 08? Because we have seen the remnants of them in the files for Live 08 PC. Imagine if we got that, and Live 10's gameplay, and maybe the Dynasty mode, the push Dynasty mode from Live 08 was still around and still had that great sim engine and those great features, and they kept building on that. NBA Live 11, the NBA Live 11 that we never got because of NBA Elite 11, and didn't get that either, obviously, but imagine what NBA Live could have been if they had MJ and those classic teams and Live 10's gameplay building on that for NBA Live 11. NBA Live 11 could have really held its own against NBA 2K11. Does 2K11 still have MJ and the Jordan Challenge? Who knows?
Well, the lack of depth in the Live series since Live 06 on PS3 has been as destructive as the inconsistent and overall poor gameplay.
Agreed.
At times. And I think that you can't release a new NBA Live. I do think they're coming back. I've said it for a few years now. I do think they're coming back. You can't release a new NBA Live without roster sharing.
No.
Without a proper edit player and create a player feature. Without retro content offline. Right? Without the ability to use multiple teams in a franchise mode. Without a decently deep franchise mode in general. Like, you need to have the depth that people want, and that in the depth, similar depth to what your competitor has had success with, right? So, I do think they're coming back, and I hope that when they do, they're going to come out strong, depth and gameplay wise.
And you can't just take it in a new direction and focus on focus on the streets, focus on that online team play mode. You absolutely do need to have a robust online team play mode because that is very popular now. But you also need to appeal to the traditional gamers, the offline gamers, the franchise gamers, the people who just want to play the NBA side of my career, or the one as it is obviously in NBA Live, the career mode. You need to have that depth. I mean, are you going to have all of the legends that 2K does? Obviously, you haven't got all of them licensed, but you include as many as you can. You have some kind of all-decade team, some kind of legends pool. You do something, and you can do something that's different to what 2K is doing by having a legends pool and things like that. So, no, as we've said before, we absolutely want that depth as well as the quality of gameplay, but yeah, Live 10 does bring back those wistful thoughts of what if, because if they had made some right moves here and there, they were on a good path with Live 10. 2K10 outsold it. It also came out on more platforms. That's also worth noting there. But it was very well received. People thought this is the best Live on this generation, and this could get better. And they really dropped the ball on it.
It also looked great.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not just the
face.
snappy gameplay, snappy
are we going to bring
controls.
Are we going to bring up Run Test face again? Because that's like the best Meta World Peace face ever.
A lot of the cyber faces are great. And I think a lot of the animations look great. They had improved the way dunks look. You don't get the same rocket dunks that you were getting in the late 2000s NBA Lives. The dribbling looks the best probably in the series on that game. They give you the size up option, which is just amazing. So they had size ups. They had that size ups in NBA Live 10, but they didn't have them in NBA Live 19. Go figure.
Signature running animations. Players actually having their own distinct running style. That's pretty unique.
Yeah, it's really unique. They were trying really hard to bring, NBA action and NBA authenticity to the forefront with NBA Live 10. And authenticity has really been missing in the series ever since.
But wait, Derek, Andrew, I thought NBA Live was always arcade. That's what they're telling me.
Oh, my God. The thing is in a game like NBA Live 08, and I've said this before, they tried to slow down the pace to almost a crawl. I call the movement crab movement. In that game, they were trying so hard with NBA Live 08, the one with Gilbert Arenas on the cover, to make a statement in the sim basketball space. They really slowed down the action. It's really hard to even appear to be running at full speed in that game. And I think there's been a lot of titles in the late 2000s, especially, that were overall NBA Live way more sim than they were arcade leaning. And I think that with NBA Live 10, I think they found a really good combination of, what we talked about on a prior episode, the hybrid, right?
Yeah.
The sim elements, sim sequences, but with an arcade leaning edge in many ways, because you have the fantastic dunks, maybe too many flashy dunks, but still that's fun, right? In a video game.
It's very exaggeration. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I think that of NBA Live 10, sure, maybe it leans a little bit more arcade, but it is the hybrid that most basketball gamers enjoy.
I think so too. It's also been fun, speaking of Live 08, to see the Live 01 legends, Nate and Roger, actually get into some Live 08. I did not expect that. That was, as the kids say, that was not on my bingo card in 2023.
Yeah, that was in the top 10 too. I think it was Nate playing, and he threw an alley-oop to Kings legend Brad Miller. I say that incredibly loosely, legend. And he throws down a two-handed jam off the alley-oop. It is cool to see them playing NBA Live 08. I love how they mix it up. They were playing Live 06 for a while. They were into Live 05. They uploaded a ton of video to NBA Live 2004, and they had a custom season going on that. I love the fact that they spread it out. And that leads me to my next question. What else are you playing?
Well, 2K6 is still in the rotation. Obviously, the Class of 2001 versus 2000 was the game that I played. That's going to be coming out. Live 96, you and I connected on that and had a game using my old 2001 complete update. I say complete update. It isn't complete, but compared to what the roster updates were like at the time, and what we could do with the art updates at the time, was pretty comprehensive at the very least. And, man, that was a pretty fun game. Man, was it tough in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and how about that block I had with Iverson on Kevin Garnett?
That was great.
I mean,
yeah.
That was, he was trying to throw it down on me, and I met him right at the rim. Strangely satisfying blocks in that game for a game that came out, in the mid-90s, where you can absolutely meet people at the rim and just snatch the ball right out of their hands. And that's what I did with Iverson on that play. And I had it really going with Iverson in the first half. And here's the cool part. Andrew actually hosted. And, his internet is terrible. That's not a secret. He's in Australia. His internet is poor. So as a host, he's not strong. But NBA Live 96 worked really well for me. So I was able to, do spin moves with Iverson. The way you can do spin moves in that game, which is kind of just like, you don't have a spin move button. You kind of have to whirl the joystick around and have your back to the defender and then, spin it the other way. And then he can go into his shot.
Run in a circle, yeah.
Right, exactly. But I was doing that with Iverson and hitting some really tough contested shots from the perimeter. I had a couple nice drives and everything. And honestly, that feels good as the client when you're hosting. To be able to execute like that. I remember there was a game that we played of NBA Live 08 using your classic teams roster. And we were using 80s MJ, so young Jordan. And I remember pulling off a bunch of good moves in that game as the client. And it feels extra special because I got a little bit of lag there, but I know the game really well and I'm still able to execute.
Need to get you that footage as well. I'm so behind on getting all this stuff done with various footage, but look towards more of those highlights coming out, as always, on the YouTube channel. But yeah, I've definitely got a backlog of stuff I need to work with, and it's fun to dust off that game. Obviously, Live 96, one of my all-time favorites, Live 96 PC, but to play it with that mod that I was making, kind of really more for the artistic expression at that point. I wasn't playing it as much, but I wanted to go out and release one last roster for that game, and really enjoyed making that. And shout out to Bobby H, who I unfortunately left out of the credits. What a faux pas in the modding community, but he made those art updates for me, the Wizards word mark that replaced the Bullets gold word mark, and all those logos. And how cool is it to see art updates? You made those portraits, obviously, and that's always awesome to see that work in progress roster we have there, which I need to get back to creating some players for. But how awesome was it to see that updated art and even some altered jersey colors? I mean, we couldn't do anything with the courts back then, but you could change we found out how to change the palettes for the jerseys, essentially having jersey updates for a very primitive jersey designs in that game. But it was really cool to see. It's
the little things that make it a special experience as opposed to just playing the vanilla game.
Yeah.
Right. And, the court doesn't need to be exactly right. But the jerseys, like you stated, they can look a little bit different. You can do different things with portraits, all of that. And it still makes it that unique experience. And we've talked about it before. We call it minimalist modding.
Yes.
Right? Basically using what the game gives you and maybe sometimes a little bit more. But that's why those mods are still so fun. And I still think that they're very, very authentic, is because they're not the vanilla game. Right? There's definitely like special touches that you notice immediately before you hit the hardwood and when you hit the virtual hardwood.
Absolutely. But before we get into what you've been playing recently with that 2001 game in Live 96, what about Matt Geiger, the Geiger counter?
I mean, if we didn't have Matt Geiger in that game, we wouldn't have been able to compete.
Yeah. What a beast.
So he was catching the ball in the high post and attacking the rim like Amari Stoudemire and throwing it down two-handed, one-handed. He hit a couple mid-range shots, etc. It is fun to go back and experience those players again, right? In old games, guys like Matt Geiger, players like Chris Dudley, the bench guys, right? Because remember, when we played NBA in the Zone 2, we leaned heavily on the bench on Jim McIlvaine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and also Craig Elo. So it's nice to go back to the 90s or, the early 2000s and whatnot and use those bench guys because you and I remember them so well. And then when one stands out and has a great performance like Matt Geiger and, Jim McIlvaine and whatnot, it's memorable. So they're video game legends to us.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to have to say Matt Geiger. The Geiger counter is going to be a video game legend moving forward. But no, that nostalgia for not just the stars of the time, which we obviously have, going back and playing with MJ, with Dr. J, with Clyde Drexler, obviously, for you, we enjoy that so much, but it is those lesser-known players, the role players, or the borderline all-stars sometimes. Some of the guys that aren't remembered, but they were very good role players or were pretty good borderline all-stars. Just be able to pull out a game, fire it up again, and play with those old names. Yeah, the nostalgia goes well beyond the big names. But that's what I've been playing, and I'm going to continue to mix it up and connect with you to mix it up as well. But do you have anything? Do you have any stories to share from recent sessions?
We've been playing, my brothers and I, NBA 2K19 and NBA 2K17. My brother Nick and I are still playing NBA 2K14 and NBA Live 06. We have a bunch of games from different decades in the rotation. We kind of soured on NBA 2K24, both for the PC and for the Series X. So we haven't been playing that recently. But I did want to state something that I recommend. So do you have Project 64 installed, the N64 emulator?
I do indeed, yes.
So it's manageable on certain games when you use, say, a PS4, PS5 controller or an Xbox Series X or Xbox One controller. Like, you can map it so certain games are playable. For example, Mario Kart. Mario Kart 64, you have the gas button, you have the item button, and whatnot, and that's really all you need. So it's manageable. But there's certain games that require the Z button, which is on the back of the controller, to function properly. And they require sometimes the C buttons, which are the yellow buttons on the top right. So one thing I was struggling with is I was playing these games with my Xbox One controller, my wireless controller, and there were certain games that just were not functioning properly. So I went on Amazon and I was like, my brothers and I, we want to play F-Zero X. It's one of our favorite games of all time. We consider it possibly the greatest racing game we've ever played. We want to play GoldenEye 007. These are games that we played so much back then that just do not function properly with the Xbox One controller. So I went on Amazon and I looked up N64 USB controller for the PC. And I was able to pick up 3 N64 USB controllers. They look exactly like an N64 controller. They function exactly like an N64 controller that's plugged into your PC. So this is sort of a D's Deals thing. And I think I picked up 3 of them for about, I want to say 35 or 40 bucks.
Nice.
Yeah. And that's not bad. That's not too bad. And these things are amazing. So last night we jumped on F-Zero X for a couple hours and we're using these USB N64 controllers, and it's like we're literally sitting in front of an N64. It was phenomenal. The functionality is exactly the same as an N64 controller. And then for a while afterwards, we played GoldenEye 007. It felt like we were in the late 90s, early 2000s again, Andrew. So I highly recommend for those who love N64, or at least a few games for N64, and you have Project 64 on your PC, I highly recommend going on Amazon and searching USB N64 controller, because there's some awesome ones out there.
No, I absolutely second that recommendation. I've had my USB N64 controllers for about 10 years now. When I started getting into the emulators, I actually invested in those. And I also have a couple of Super Nintendo ones as well. Now, obviously, the modern Xbox PlayStation-style controller will work fine as a Super Nintendo controller, but I also wanted that authenticity, got a good deal at the time. That was from ThinkGeek back in the day. And I think ThinkGeek is actually, I think they've been absorbed by Amazon now. So that was the RetroLink controllers that are the brand that I have. But I absolutely recommend them. Back in the day, before that, I actually had an adapter that you could plug two N64 controllers into a USB adapter for the PC, and it actually connects to original N64 controllers. So that was fun to use, but the USB ones work so much better. They configure automatically as generic joysticks in Windows, so there's no need to download any drivers or anything, and yeah, you can just assign them perfectly for N64 games, so absolutely invest in them.
Yeah. And, the thing is the emulators are so good now, right? Project 64 has gone through so many updates that it's running these games absolutely gorgeous, even if you stretch the screen in like 1080p, 60 FPS, running often smoother than what you get on the console.
Oh, yeah, Zelda Ocarina of Time only runs at 20 frames per second on the original hardware, so it works better, yeah.
Yeah, it looks, and it's amazing. It's a new experience sometimes.
Absolutely.
When you put on these games and it's running in a much higher resolution and whatnot. And then at the same time, you have, like the PlayStation emulator, DuckStation, the new one, that just runs games even better than EPCXE. And they're just always working on these emulators. They're always upgrading them. They're always optimizing them. So if you're not into gaming on PC using emulators, you're missing out, because there's a lot of great emulators out there and the games work awesome.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community. So Derek, I noticed that you said that you have been moving away from 2K24, you and your brothers, and I've not been playing it much either, and the community seems to be kind of lukewarm at best on it as well, at least our part of the community, our slice of the basketball gaming community, and you threw out a couple of questions that are kind of illuminating from the responses of why the community's not really into 2K24.
Yeah, I'm just seeing a lack of highlights, right? I'm hearing a lack of positive conversation about the game. I'm seeing a lack of mods, for the PC version, but specifically for the PS5 Series X versions, I'm just not seeing as many highlights as I've seen in years past, whether it's, my NBA eras, the current teams, etc. So that's why I asked that question, are you still playing this game? Are you sick of it already, basically? Are you still playing this game? And if you are, how much? And if you're not playing NBA 2K24, what are you playing for past titles?
And we've talked in depth about why we're not really feeling 2K24. And looking at these responses, Derek, a lot of people feel the same way that we do, as far as the feel of the game and not feeling captured by it, not inspired by the gameplay, not enjoying, obviously, the microtransactions and so forth, and the focus on certain design elements that aren't really resonating with them. But, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of familiar sentiment in the responses.
Yeah, I think the gameplay, the 2K gameplay over the last few years has just gotten stale for a lot of people. It's not incredibly exciting for them. I think a lot of times it's super frustrating on the sticks, whether it has to do with the shooting mechanics, the suction, etc. I'm just seeing a lack of enjoyment when people, discuss the game, a lack of positive thoughts on it. So yeah, the responses to this were not overall favorable for 2K24.
And before we get into the responses, to your point, that staleness, I think a lot of it comes from the fact that the games are meant to be disposed of. They're disposable games meant to be thrown away after a year to move on to the next one. So there is that staleness just across the board.
I think what's making a lot of people angry right now, too, those people who play online, is just all the patches. Right? There's been a bunch of patches that nerf shooting, then they make it easier, then they make it harder. They're just constantly messing with the game and the game's mechanics. And people feel like they're getting a different experience on the sticks each time they turn it on as a result. And we've talked many times on this show about how developers have hurt games by leaning on patching over the last, I would say probably decade or so. And it can really hurt the games. It can make people get super frustrated with them, and it can make people want to put them down.
It's become very normalized releasing the game in a state that, the early adopters are basically going to be beta testers. I mean, that's a bit of a harsh way of putting it, but it feels that way sometimes.
Yeah, and it also hurts the offline experience, right?
Definitely.
Because these patches are not just for, playing in the rec. They're not just for quote unquote competitive online play or online play in general. It's hurting my team, right? It's hurting, your exhibition games. It's hurting like your online play now. It's hurting all of that stuff. So it's like the snowball effect where it's like a catch-all too, where it's just hitting, the gameplay frustration is hitting all of the different modes, no matter what type of gamer you are.
So let's get to the responses now. First up, we have Thundershack, and speaking to the staleness and the repetitiveness of the games, says NBA 2K24 being a copy and paste of 2K23 on PC definitely leaves a sour taste. Still haven't bought it. Games I've played more recently than both 23 and 24, Live 05, Live 06, Live 10, 2K10, 2K11, 2K12, 2K13, a lot, 2K14, 2K16, 2K17, 2K18, and puts LOL in brackets after that, 2K19, and 2K20. And of course, Thundershack has released the great retro project for 2K20 PC. And you noted in your reply, actually, we're often down on 2K18. It's not our favorite in the series, but we actually did have a fun session of that recently.
Yeah, I actually enjoy 2K18 quite a bit more right now than I do NBA 2K24, so that says a lot. What's cool about Thundershack is, he is invested in that 2K20 mod. His retro seasons and whatnot. And he's put a lot of hard work in that, but it hasn't made him drop the classics. He talks about spending a ton of time on 2K13. He mentions mid 2000s titles and everything. I didn't even know he played that many different basketball video games from the past. So, kudos to him and shout out to Thundershack for, mixing up his experience and not just sticking with 2K20 because he has that huge mod for it, but, keeping things fresh.
And actually, in response to Thundershack's tweet, or post as it is now on X, 707 says, I bought and played 2K24 for an hour and asked for a refund on Steam. It is copy and paste of 2K23 with worse UI menu. I did keep the game installed, though I can't play it, so I can export new cyberfaces and other files from it when needed. I think for a lot of people, buying it for the assets to export it to import it to 2K23 or other games for modding purposes may be the only reason people are really buying it in our community.
Yeah, I think part of the issue is that let's talk about the PC version for a second. If you're expecting a new graphics direction or improved graphics, you're not going to get it, right? If you're expecting a ridiculous enhancement in gameplay, something new and fresh, something that's going to make your experience that much better, for the PC version at this point, you're not going to get it, right? And I think that the gameplay actually on the PC version has taken many steps back, even from NBA 2K21. and NBA 2K22, et cetera. The controls seem to feel better on those games. The dribbling itself has less ball warping. It feels like there is a little bit less suction and that the sliders work appropriately in order to enhance your gameplay experience on those games, as opposed to 2K24 PC, where you're adjusting sliders and oftentimes it just feels like it's not doing anything. Right. So I think that the PC gameplay and the Series X and PS5 gameplay, just that direction with this new motion system has just gotten stale for so many people. And there's just a lot of people who are not having fun with it. And it sounds like he's one of those people that got the game, spent an hour on it, on the virtual hardwood, and realized, hey, this is no more fun than what we've had over the last few years. Why would I keep this game?
Well, to that point, Tillhouse says, it just lacks in presentation overall to me. Lighting is bad. Textures are below par of even Gen 4. Overall play movement makes it not fun when offensive animations are faster than defense. At this point, I just don't enjoy certain things the devs made decisions on. And that, I think, speaks to the staleness and the direction. People are seeing the game moving this direction for a while now and are tired of it.
I also appreciate Tillhouse because he's a 2K next maker. And the fact that he gives honest critiques about the game, and the fact that, he wants to see 2K be better. He's also mentioned, I believe, that he would love competition in the space and he'd love to see live come back, et cetera. Like, I appreciate that honesty. And I think that was my reply to him, that I appreciated it, because he could absolutely, in the position that he's in, just try to fanboy for 2K, right?
Absolutely.
Instead, he's been very honest on social media and said, hey, this game could be better, and here's the ways that it could improve and whatnot. So yeah, I appreciate him for that.
And TG So Good says 2K24 equals no, and expanded upon that by saying, I was a PC franchise mode player before the new gen of consoles. Franchise mode for PC got left behind years ago, with bugs. I supported newer console version alongside PC until this year, as it's apparent 2K has no intention to bring PC into the updated version of the game, or fix. I just don't have the bandwidth to continue to spend my time and money dealing with a product that is going further away from what I enjoy. I would also spend hours each day trying to help others get enjoyable experiences on both console and PC. It has been draining. And look, shout out to TG So Good for all the fantastic work he's done in our community, talking about the game, driving discussion, making suggestions about gameplay, on top of being a fantastic modder and putting out those tutorials. So I absolutely get where he's coming from. I mean, there have been times when I've thought, what can I do as far as putting out some content like how to grind for VC more effectively, how to go no money spent, but the more I've been grinding in those modes, the less fun that's been. I don't really want to encourage people to do that, because it comes down to so much metagaming, to so much not actually playing basketball, you're just figuring out a way how to make in-game currency, that I don't want to support that, and I don't want to do it myself.
We've talked about it so many times before on the NLSC podcast. It is really hard to create content for a game that you don't love.
Yeah.
It seems like work. It seems like an exercise in frustration every single time you have to make content for a game that you don't love or enjoy, etc. So I appreciate his honesty as well in that regard. He's made so much great content for the community, whether it be tutorials, YouTube videos, giving advice on the forums. He's just a great content creator and a great guy. And I think he's been great for the NLSC. But, when you create tutorials for a game, in order to make a great tutorial, you have to want to put on the game, right? You have to want to make that video. And I think that he's been frustrated with the gameplay direction, with the monetization, all of that stuff. I've seen his thoughts on X, and I've heard him talk about it in videos. Again, I appreciate his honesty as well.
And Bucky T says, I'm actually going to uninstall it because it's just taking up space. The gameplay is horrid, and even those who try and defend the 2K24 release, they know deep down this game is overall a sad experience, and capitalizes sad. The younger gen isn't even liking it. And yeah, the backlash has been real to 2K24. We're seeing it in the lack of enthusiasm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to point something out too. It's not just the older gamers that are frustrated with the mechanics and the gameplay direction.
Just get good, Derek. Get good.
And whatnot. Yeah, right. It's actually a lot of the younger players. It's a lot of the teenagers that play the game, players in their early 20s and whatnot, that are being like, well, this shooting is whack. Like, this shooting doesn't make sense. Stop patching the game so much. Stop changing the gameplay experience. There's so many of these people that are complaining about a lot of the mechanics that you and I complain about, and they're a lot younger than we are. So that is a very valid point by Bucky T, that this isn't just older gamers. Like, the younger generation is struggling with enjoyment with the 2K series at this point.
And also, to the point of not being an angry old head and defending the young crowd, I mean, we have played so many games that it certainly gives us a certain insight to what's good and what's bad, I'd like to think, anyway. But we've also had more of an opportunity to be burned out by games being stale or being subpar. If you're newer to the genre, you haven't been playing as long, you may have more of a tolerance, I think, for accepting a game that's maybe not everything you want it to be, but you're just, you're still fairly accepting of it, or you're giving it your best go. But you play more, and you're getting a little bit older, you've played more games, you start to recognize those flaws and also be burned out of them and really be sick of them.
Yeah, I think that it's very important for gamers to not limit themselves. I think you would agree. I think it's very important for gamers to branch out. And if, there's other games out there, past or present, or in different genres and whatnot, that you're going to have more fun on, drop 2K for it. Just point blank, drop 2K for it, turn that game off, put on something you're going to like, you hook up with a friend to play, all of that stuff, or a family member, and just enjoy your time gaming. Stop feeling like you have to get stuck in a grind, right? Stop feeling like you have to pay, through the teeth for VC to upgrade your player. Stop getting disappointed every time you open a My Team pack. Stop, going into a game and shooting 2 for 18 and feeling like you're shooting it right, but you're not, and then wanting to throw your controller. Put the game down, play something else. And,
exactly.
That's what you and I do, right? Like, we put 2K24 aside, and now we're playing games we love. 2K17, 2K19. I've been spending a lot of time on that. You and I had our session on NBA Live 96. I had the session with WizCard Rush on NBA Live 10. Like, gamers branch out. Trust me, you'll be glad you did.
Well, to that point, Phil Lime 2K says about 70% have left this game behind. They play other basketball games or new games like Spider-Man 2. Season 2 won't have a big impact either. And that response came in as Season 2 was ready to launch. And yeah, that goes back to your point that people will play something else, us included, obviously. And we are at the height of access, not to overuse a popular phrase there, but if people aren't happy with a game, they can very easily move on to something else. I mean, it's not like us back in the day, Derek. You go down to the video store, you hire a game, maybe it's not the best, but, that's the game you hired this week, that's what you had the money to do, so, damn it, you're going to make the most of it. So, you just push through and try and make the best of that horrible game that you rented for the 16-bit system or the 8-bit system back in the day. Can definitely speak to that, hiring some duds back in the day. But now you've got access to get that refund on Steam, to play something else. And there have been some other great games coming out. The new Mario game, the new Spider-Man game, obviously, they're coming out around about the same time. There are other options. Basketball gamers, by and large, don't just play basketball games, us included. So if you're not happy, you can go back to another basketball game, an older game that you enjoy, or play something else, new release or otherwise. So yeah, it's you can leave games behind because we are at the height of access and we have options.
Do you have any idea how much fun my brothers and I had on F-Zero X for N64 the other night? The laughs, it was just unbelievable. It was pure bliss. And, my brother Nick and I, we're playing other stuff all the time. We're playing Wild Hearts, which is a Monster Hunter World type game. We're playing Monster Hunter World, Monster Hunter Rise. We have Remnant from the Ashes as part of our rotation. We have a bunch of games that we play that are not basketball games, for when we do need a break from the virtual hardwood. And, basketball video games is always going to be my favorite. It's always going to be my favorite genre. It's always going to be my type of game. But, it's okay to branch out from the newest release with basketball games, and it's okay to branch out outside of basketball video games. So play what you enjoy.
And along the same lines, Steve, the Live King, says, the way they marketed the game says a lot. I'm trying to like it, but man, it's really hard to enjoy a game where the gameplay took a step back. And yeah, when you're trying that hard to enjoy it, that does speak volumes.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to try that hard to have fun with a basketball video game or any video game. That's a huge red flag. And I know that he's been angry lately in relation to the patches. I think the patches have really hurt his gameplay experience with NBA 2K24. I don't think he was that fond of it to begin with, but the patches just kind of broke the game for him. And I'll say again, the fact that developers have leaned so heavily on patches over the last few years and whatnot, it's really hurt video games.
Sticky Fingers says, I've never seen so few mods or NLSC topics for a game released more than a month ago. That's absolutely true. Sticky Fingers, of course, has just recently released the demo of his 2010 season roster for NBA 2K16, featuring the Lakers and Celtics. You can download that in the download section, find that in the releases section of the forum as well. More information about that. But again, the enthusiasm is not there for the game.
I am pumped to play that full release of that NBA 2K16.
Looking awesome.
09-10 mod. And he's shown so many great works in relation to cyberface improvements and new cyberfaces for that game. It looks like the art is going to be great. I think NBA 2K16's gameplay is incredibly strong. It's one of their best sim titles that they've ever created. So obviously that's going to be great in a My League atmosphere and whatnot. I'm going to want to start a season right away on that. So congrats to him on that great work. And about topics on the NLSC forum, it's not just the game, the consumer base, and just NLC members that are not creating the topics and, talking about the game. Andrew and I don't really want to talk about it either. That's why you're not seeing us create topics and you're not seeing a lot of commentary from us, because we're not going to fake it. And if you know anything about Andrew and I, we're, 100% honest at all times on these NLSC podcasts or when we're talking in the forums or on the social media, et cetera. We're not just going to, try to talk up the game and talk up experiences with the game if we're not enjoying it. So, it's the NLSC community and Andrew and I who just really don't want to talk about the game at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah. We would certainly try and drive the discussion and so forth if we were enjoying the game more. But like a lot of people, we simply aren't. And King J Mace, of course, friend of the show, fantastic content creator. We love his content so much. Responded with a GIF saying barely. And yeah, look what he was doing with 2K23, how enthusiastically he was playing that and hosting all the tournaments. And yeah, just not encouraged to move on to 2K24. When he was on the show, we were talking about that. Was he going to move on to 2K24? And he said, look, if we enjoy the gameplay and the mods are there, absolutely. But they're not, so he's not.
So him and I talked offline about this, and I think his goal now is to stick with 2K23 and all those great mods and continue the Elite Street League on that game. And you know what? I think that is the correct path, because why would you move on to the newest game if the gameplay isn't as good and the mods are not as good, right, for what you're trying to do? So I hope he does go in that direction. He was great on the NLSC podcast when we had him. He's a friend of the show, and I love connecting with him on basketball video games because we share a lot of the same feelings and philosophies about how the games, should play, what makes a fun video game, what makes an engaging video game, etc. So yeah, I'm a big fan of King J Mace.
A couple more positive responses now, actually. Popcorn Jones 77 says, yes, I'm enjoying NBA 2K24. I play PS5 and find the AI to be much improved. When offline, I play All-Star and Superstar difficulty, so I'm not seeing the warping or other crazy stuff that people see on Hall of Fame. I'm enjoying NBA eras, e.g. Larry Bird is actually playing like Larry Bird. And Look at the Game also says, I'm still playing, and shares a clip. And yeah, we know he's been doing some awesome stuff. Lookie has been doing stuff to put back King. But yeah, some people are enjoying the game a bit more than us.
Yeah. To Popcorn Jones' point, I said it on one of the podcasts that we recorded shortly after release. One of the improvements they did make was to the AI, like the computer difficulty, especially on the PC, Xbox One and PS4 versions. My biggest problem with the ramp up in difficulty on the Series X and PS5 version is it doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel like the computer is actually better or smarter. It feels like they just added more suction to the game to make it harder for you to basically move around and move the ball, etc., offensively. It made the game more frustrating as opposed to more of an organic feeling in relation to the ramp up in difficulty. So I'm a fan of smarter AI. I'm a fan of smarter defense, smarter shot selection and everything, but it can't feel artificial. Right. Yeah. And I feel like in my experience, that's how it felt.
God of Thunder says, I'm in an online LeBron era league right now, but that's it. I could care less about the other modes. iMason KOG says, not done yet, but I'm working on my highlight reel. So a couple more people enjoying the game a little bit more than we are. Rel House says, I'm trying to enjoy the game. Basketball video games, at B-Ball Video Games, as we've said before, fantastic account to follow. Loves basketball gaming as we do. Just as passionate with collecting as well. NBA 2K23, my NBA eras, is still holding me over, to be honest. As far as current gen goes, I mostly play older B-Ball titles by default, which we absolutely know. Hookup Guy says, I stuck with 2K23. I don't seem to have missed out on anything, at least on PC. And Short says, my favorite 2K so far. I've got a few clips I posted. So there's definitely some differing opinions there.
Yeah, it seems like multiple responses. There are people sticking with NBA 2K23, right? I think that game felt better on the sticks, and people enjoyed the shooting even more in that game than what they're experiencing on NBA 2K24. To Relhouse's point, he always seems happiest when he's playing NBA Live 19. His Live 19 highlights are some of the best that I've ever seen. So he is trying to move on and play the newest 2K title, but I think he just keeps gravitating back to Live 19, kind of like how you keep gravitating back to 2K14.
And just a few more responses on X here. Renell Parker says, I'm enjoying the gameplay, offline gamer. However, the lighting is horrible. The courts and player models are dated. Jason Paul says, still playing it, but waiting on rosters to start a Kobe era in my NBA. I think they tinker a bit too much with tuning the online gameplay, but that goes beyond sports games nowadays. Justin says, I've been playing NBA 2K1 on the Sega Dreamcast. Something serious lately, LOL. Talk about going back to the past there. It's All Good says, I had to take a break from 2K for the Cyberpunk expansion, but I hopped back in a couple of days ago and immediately remembered how much I'm loving the offline experience. It's not perfect, but I'm having a blast with my only 3&D guys expansion team in my NBA eras.
I love the fact that there are people that are enjoying the game. We've talked about it before. We want people to love the newest release every single year. Right? We want people to feel like they got their money's worth. We want to we want people to at least enjoy some of the content in the game, whether they play offline, online, whether it's my team, whether it's, starting a my NBA. We want people to get some enjoyment out of it. Obviously, that hasn't been our experience. Overall, we've had to put it down, but we would rather have more positive comments than negative.
Yeah, and look, even if we're not enjoying the game, we're not the authority on what you like. We like to think we know our stuff about
exactly.
We like to think we know our stuff about basketball gaming, but we can't tell you what you like and what you enjoy. But speaking of what's right or wrong to enjoy, and when it comes to gaming, once again, like what you like. Hollywood Outbreak says, "Is it bad I'm going to connect my old Xbox 360 and play NBA 2K11?" To which I say, absolutely not. Go for it.
Absolutely not. One of the greatest basketball video games ever made. Some consider it the greatest. And that's a game that you and I need to connect on and have a parsec session with, and post those highlights to YouTube, because I think that game is excellent from a co-op atmosphere against the CPU or versus against another human. And yeah, there's definitely nothing wrong with hooking up that 360.
Yeah, so I think there's some very common reasons why people aren't enjoying 2K24 as much, very similar to the reasons that we've kind of gone very lukewarm at the best on it. And yeah, why it's just not resonating with the community, and why we're not seeing as many highlights or indeed mods.
Yeah, and we've seen an incredible lack of modding activity for 2K24. Probably the lowest amount of activity that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
For an NBA 2K game. And it is concerning. And I did put out a community question related to that, asking the community, basically, what do you think the reason is for a lack of mods? And for those creators out there, for the actual modders, why are you not modding this game? And we did receive a ton of responses to that community question. But because there were so many responses, we are going to move that topic to next week's show.
And I'm looking forward to diving into that as well, because obviously modding is not the only thing we do in our community, and we've often tried to expand our content beyond modding. I mean, that's why I do my articles, that's why we do the podcast and the video content, which people are really getting behind and enjoying, and thank you so much for supporting that content as well. But modding is what our community was built upon ultimately, and yeah, we have seen that lack of activity, so that is a very concerning and important topic for us to dive into.
And you know I love modding, and I've had absolutely no interest in modding any game post NBA 2K19.
No more mask mods for 2K24.
Now that was fun.
Yeah.
And the reason that was fun is not because, and I created that mod actually for 2K21, and I believe I also moved it to 2K22. The reason why I created those is because I was trying to get better in Blender, right? And at the time I wanted to use the newest 2K in order to practice. So that was more not because I wanted to use the mask in the game, because I didn't even use him in the game after I created him. It was more, hey, I'm going to sharpen my modding skills.
Yeah, sometimes that's what it's about. I mean, as I said with my 2001 roster update for Live 96, that was not a mod that I played with that much back in the day, which is why it was so refreshing to play a session with you using it. But by that point, I had moved on, so that was very much an artistic expression, and what can I do to really give a send-off to my Live 96 modding? I mean, I thought it was a send-off at the time. Obviously, in years since, I have revisited that game to make some definitive mods or a little mod here and there, because it is fun to retro mod, and I do advocate for retro modding as much as retro gaming. But yeah, it's but by that point, that roster was very much a creative project more so than I need to have a 2001 roster to play with.
Right, and I think that it was the same thing kind of with 2K11 with you. You were sharpening your modding skills with that game and using the different tools. And it was really the first 2K that you seriously got into a roster project on.
Yes.
Right. And you didn't even really play that mod that you were creating. It was more just, something you were going to do for the community, and then something that was going to sharpen your modding skills with that game. But as we talked about, and we've been open and honest about that, and projects that I haven't finished on prior games, and back to TG So Good's point, if you don't love the game that you're modding, or you don't love the project that you're creating, or you don't have like a deep interest in the content centered around that project, you're not going to finish it, or you're not going to want to do it. And you were not that interested in that mod that you were creating.
No, and it didn't help that things kept getting pushed back as I was learning the ropes, and it just felt like I was missing deadlines with it. So my enthusiasm waned for many reasons. But yeah, you absolutely need to be right into the project, right into the game you're playing. I just put out the Monday tip-off this week talking about the possibility of a minimalist project. Could you have a single season roster with a bunch of what ifs? Like, let's say a 2005 roster for NBA Live 2005, where a few years earlier Tim Duncan went to the Magic, and then Kobe goes to the Clippers in the 2004 offseason. So you're trying to get all kinds of what ifs together in one roster, not just a collection of teams from different eras of what ifs, and what if this roster was, what if this happened, but what if all of these what ifs viably happened in the same era, and trying to make a viable roster. That's a minimalist project that I would think about, because you can make that with the assets that are in the game. You just have to move the players around to where you think they might be with the what if situation. So that's really more about diving into NBA history and trying to work out, okay, if this move happens, what doesn't move, what other move doesn't happen, and try and figure that out and move those players around. That would be a fun project. And those minimalist projects, those smaller projects, are things that I'm looking at. But you're absolutely right. It comes down to passion for playing the games, modding them, creating any kind of content for them. You can't just do it just because you need to do it. Your content is not going to be great if you do that.
Basically, the lesson on this NLSC podcast is do what you love, no matter what.
Always, yeah.
Always.
And we hope you love listening to the show each and every week, obviously. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's episode. As always, we thank you for tuning in and invite you to join us again next week, either on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or your podcast app of choice. In the meantime, please connect with us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us. And of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can reach me on X at D for3G and at D for 384. I am also on YouTube, D for 3, and on the NLSC, D for 3.
I am Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X. The NLSC is on X and Facebook at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nba-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.